You most likely know the Wii. Launched in 2006, this new console would take the world by storm, as it would climb charts and break records. Whether you had one, or merely saw the old memes of it printing money, you would have probably played it at least once. Why is this? How did it become Nintendo's best-selling home console? Why should I care? Actually, I don't have an answer to that last one, but if you ended up here on a YouTube rabbit hole and like random facts that actually have a mild shot at helping you, stay a while and learn the marketing genius that was the Nintendo Wii. I'm going to be breaking down this analysis into 7 sections of varying lengths, starting with the design, as there is a lot to cover here. As you may already know, the design of the Wii was easily its most successful feature. Let's start with the console. All the components used to make the Wii were commercially available off-the-shelf hardware. While the console's specs would not even compare to the other consoles at the time, with how far below it was, it offered a different strength: price. While the original intention was to get the Wii's price all the way down to $100, they were only able to get it down to $250. A $150 markup might sound like a lot, but it would half the price of the cheap PS3 model and nearly half the Xbox 360. To say it was affordable would be the understatement of the century. The price was not the only thing to worry about though, as the console itself would have to help this accessibility style it was going for. This is an issue it would face slightly, as it did not use HDMI, and newer TVs were beginning to move more towards HDMI and not older video output sources. However, this downside would also work as an upside, since people who had more money were more likely to invest in dongles to hook it up to new TVs, while people who got it for the low price point most likely had older TVs, so the problem wouldn't even happen to them. But these are all things you wouldn't normally notice while playing. What about the more shiny stuff? AKA the remote and its revolutionary design. The Wii remote is absolutely incredible in design, being based off a TV remote to make people recognize how to use it easier. It'd be held vertical with a few buttons on the front and a trigger on the back. It would also be the first to successfully bring a large-scale motion controls. Now, let me address something. If you've been in Nintendo's scene, or gaming for that matter, you most likely have heard the numerous complaints about how bad the Wii's motion controls were. While there is truth in that, the main thing to consider is it never had to be ultra-precise. Since its main use in most games would be simple actions, even having decent motion controls would be so much for people playing the console. Moving is something you do every day, whether it's your arms, legs, or even your head. You're constantly moving. Meaning when you are asked to move, it's second nature. Little to no thought goes into it. Motion controls capitalize this because instead of using the abstract idea of buttons doing intangible things, moving your arm in a circle is something you've been doing since birth. So you can expect it to be an easy concept to pick up. The controller basing itself around mostly motion controls would make it more accessible, but would limit its use in complicated games. I mean, look at it. It only has 3 buttons you can easily hit because of the way you hold it. They knew this going into it, so they designed 2 workarounds. The first of these workarounds is holding the controller horizontally, which would make the controller better resemble the classic NES controller. While not the most comfortable controller to use, when held this way, it is good enough to get by in most cases, and limited buttons keeps confusion limited. The other solution was the bottom of the controller having a port. This port would allow you to attach controller extensions, whether it's the nunchuck, Pro Controller, or some other abomination to attach to the end of it, and allowed more buttons and better controls for games that was not made for this controller type. This allowed for easy porting of games to the console, which is insanely important because investing months into making your game playable on another platform is usually not worth the effort, meaning game developers were more likely to put their game on there if they only had to change a few things to make it work. Whether it was on the side of the game developers or the consumers, the only limit the Wii really had was hardware. For being a triple alternative, it was perfect. There was nothing too notable with the packaging, as it was kept straightforward and minimalistic. There were 2 major designs, one showing off the console and remote, and the other showing a person holding the remote. This could be the same packaging, just on a different side, but I don't know because Google couldn't help me clarify. Anyway, the design of the person holding the controller was really big because it would allow them to show how to hold the controller in case not everyone got it, and it was different for consoles. This subliminal device would help a lot of people to play with the controller, as reading up on it would not be too interesting, but seeing a picture of it straight on the box you had to buy it, well, that's a lot easier to see. But the console itself and the remotes it uses are not exactly the thing you're going to be considering when you go to buy it. Instead, you're going to be looking at all the games it could. So, what did it offer? Well, sadly, the options were limited, so they needed to be good. and this is where they ran into some hiccups. The notable games available when the console came out were Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, Red Steel, and Metroid Prime 3. While the games were held in decently high regards, it was most notably by hardcore fans. While the nostalgia in me wants to say that one of my favorite games, Twilight Princess, was more than enough to carry the console. It really wasn't, though it would come from the most known game franchise on release games. The first mainline Mario game would not get released until the next year. Needless to say, it was floundering a bit at launch. Its savior, though? Wii Sports. Since it was a simple game based around using the motion controls to recreate common sports, it received great praise and be effortless to get into as most rules would already be known. This alone made sure that as soon as you bought the console, you had at least one good game since it was included with the console, except in Japan and South Korea. Same concept as Wii Sports, but it would not stay that way for long though, as when games started to get released, they were non-stop. Wii Play would release in early December of that year, using the same concept as Wii Sports, but focusing more on a minigame-styled mode, which continued the simple motion control design and was well received, being the 5th best-selling game on the Wii. Then, 2007 would hit, and everything would change. Wii Fit, Super Mario Galaxy, Mario Party 8, Mario Sonic at the Olympic Games, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, Super Paper Mario, Mario Strikers, all would release that year. Whether you were a beginner or a veteran of gaming, there is a game for you. This would not stop either, as Mario Kart Wii, Wii Sports Resort, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Wii Fit Plus, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Just Dance 2 and 3, Wii Party, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Donkey Kong Country Returns, Mario Sonic at the Winter Olympic Games, Animal Crossing City Folk. The list just keeps going on. This is just looking at the top 20 best-selling games on the console. The Wii would end up with 1,596 games on it with nearly 200 exclusives. Well, not the most extensive library, its variety was something other consoles had nowhere near the same. Which is a big thing to keep in mind while thinking about these things. The Wii did not have to compete with other consoles as it simply existed in its own lane for the most part. So much so, it was not uncommon for people who already owned a separate console to pick it up just to have it. All this to say, after some time the games really started flowing onto it. And these weren't expensive games either. Normal games would run you about $60 each, but for first-party Wii games, it was only $50. Since the hardware was limited in what it could do, it meant that developers would not have to focus hard on groundbreaking graphics or mind-boggling worlds. Instead, they could focus on compact, enjoyable games. This would help put some safety into the game developers, because they were going to have to take a venture, along with Nintendo, into some deep waters that were not explored before. The Wii would take a bold approach to choosing its target market. Instead of going after the normal demographics that other companies would by targeting people who are between the ages of 15 to 30 and already interested in playing video games, they decided to go after the complete opposite. They would instead capitalize on the fact that there's an enormous demographic of people outside of that age range that never gave video games a shot. Sales would show this would end up working out for them, their best-selling markets being 6 to 11 for men and 25 to 34 for women. These are almost completely untouched markets, as young children run the risk of being sheltered by parents not wanting to buy the consoles for them, but the Wii bypassed this with designing it with the intention of having parents be able to play with their children, and having a vast selection of child-friendly games. This attacking of a different demographic is known as the Blue Ocean strategy. It is referred to this because they jumped into a completely unknown market and created their own space. But this did not come without risks. They covered their bases though, knowing dedicated fans would continue to purchase without second thought. The normal markets, 15 to 30, were covered. This was to ensure they didn't lose their entire fan base. Although with all this Melee stuff, who knows anymore? But, you know, at least they put some effort into it at one point. Either way, this would still be a risky move, as most of their sales would be resting on the fact that they needed to capture this new market, and it was there to be captured. And, well, let's just say it wouldn't fail. The Wii would end up being released a year after the Xbox 360, and only 7 days after the PS3, so its competition was clear. But that did not make it any easier to compete. Sony was just getting off the back of the PS2, which is the best-selling video game console even still to this day, which is a video on its own. If you really like this, throw a like and a subscribe, and that might be the next video. Needless to say, prospects were looking good for them. That was until the release of the PS3, where its reception was incredibly mixed. You see, it had a $500 price tag on the cheap model. The cost-effective version was twice the price of the Wii, and nearly double its predecessor. It would offer a lot of options with Blu-ray and backwards compatibility, but this would not be enough to help people swallow the horrendous price tag. Later on, though, more success would come to the PS3 as people discovered its capabilities, and new slim and super slim models were released, with much more digestible price tags. PlayStation was not the only competitor, though, as the Xbox 360 had been out for a year at this point. Its launch was not pretty either, as the notorious Red Ring of Death ran rampant, which at random times could make your console entirely useless. Despite this, though, sales for the console were outdoing its predecessor, and mainly because it would bring the revolution to gaming that the PS3 was expected to have: online. You're able to purchase digital software through the console, as well as play online with other people over the internet, even talking to one another. This alone would set it leagues apart and subsequently cause both Sony and Nintendo to follow suit, including their own online on their consoles. Having the online from the Xbox 360, without the chance to Red Ring, and having half the price of the PS3, make it a much easier investment for any household whether they were used to gaming or not due to its reliability. A key part to selling anything is making sure people know it exists. You can't buy non-existent things. Well, other than NFTs, that is. The already established strengths of the Wii would help it immensely. Recommending the console was easier with the low price tag, as well as most people playing it were new to games, so they wanted to share this new experience with their friends. Plus, kids at a young age who had the Wii were less afraid of telling their friends about video games since they'd be in elementary to middle school, and they would just speak their minds, for the better or for worse. The sales would prove that this was a very effective strategy, as it hit its peak sales in its third year of being released. Most consoles will peak at their second year, but the Wii would have a longer longevity, fading slowly over the years and never having a huge dip like others would. Word of mouth is not the only way to spread knowledge of your product, though. If no one in an area knows about it, they can't tell each other about it. You have to introduce it to them. This would take place first on the stage of E3 2005, where it would be announced as the Nintendo Revolution. Mostly sold on the idea of its backwards compatibility at the time, since the audience would mostly be people who at least knew about their previous games. Reaching their true audience would take more than that, though. So they decided to focus their ads on more broad demographics, excluding ads for games that would help sales, and instead we're going to focus entirely on the ones for the console specifically. They were developed to get this idea across. The commercials, at least the ones in America and Japan, I haven't been able to find any other ads for the console because it's all been buried apparently, were different for the two regions. Both would include families playing the console, clearly showing off the motion controls. The key ideas behind this was to show adults having fun alongside their children, as well as on their own. Not every Wii ad would have kids, and if they did, they would not be the main focus. This would work in their favor as to not have many people write it off as a simple toy. The differences then would start showing up. It was marketed in a lot of commercials in Japan with WarioWare and Wii Music. In the States, however, it'd be used alongside Wii Sports more often. Games aside, the American commercials focused on family, and usually the adults competing with the kids. You actually may remember the "we would like to play" guys. The Japanese commercials really tried to hammer home the point of the console being good for housewives. Every single commercial would have one of them, and they were typically the main focus, as well as the only games shown in these ads were rhythm games, probably to suit that market. With housewives being a lot more prevalent in Japanese culture, this makes sense since they would have a lot of time, and they would be extremely busy, but no one's really busy all day. I just find it crazy how they try to hammer home that point. It's almost comical. To give credit where credit is due, it would work. While I cannot find the stats, although Nintendo is incredibly open with their sales numbers on their website, which I found pretty interesting. The Wii altogether would just not end up selling well in Japan, as their other consoles, especially with the DS still being the most sold console in Japan. This could be seen as the reason, but I don't think it was necessarily to blame. If I had to take a guess, I would say its overall focus towards Western audience, which has always been a big thing for Nintendo, especially obvious when you think that Mario only has an English voice. This aside, it would not perform bad, just not the incredible success it would see in the West. Nintendo has been well known in the industry for a lengthy period of time with their first arcade-style game in 1973, which was the Laser Clay Shooting System. They would then go on to make traditional arcade cabinets and eventually home consoles in 1983, with the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES was well received too, selling nearly 62 million units, though the consoles after would not be able to hit the same numbers as the NES did. This alone cemented them as a big name in the gaming market though. This would play into the Wii's favor though, as people who came from previous consoles were most likely to come from the NES. So, the backwards compatibility of Wii to NES games was super high, able to capture their long-lost market and make sure they were able to come back if they hadn't in a while. 1,596 games have been released on the console, with the latest ones coming out in 2020, aka last year at the time recording this. Which is crazy to think about, since the console came out in 2006. It's been 14 years and people still wanted to make games for it. While the console would not have the most games of a console, it would still be in the top 10. Of the people making games for the console, there was one who was leading the market, and that was Nintendo themselves, who released 45 games up to around the time of the launch of the Wii U. To list a few of them for you: Wii Sports, Super Mario Kart Wii, Wii Sports Resort, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Wii Play, Wii Fit Plus, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Super Mario Galaxy, which all would make up the top 9 selling games on the Wii. 10th place goes to Just Dance 3. No clue what made 3 so good, but must have done something right. This consistency would help the Wii with its longer than usual lifespan, because Nintendo themselves would be the ones supplying most of the games. Speaking of its lifespan, while it may not be the most impressive, it would still end up at about 7 years before it got discontinued, and would continue to sell for a couple years to come. It ended up placing top 10 in most rankings of longest lifespans of consoles. It would also shape the way Nintendo looked at gaming, so they would follow suit both unsuccessfully and successfully in the years to come. Not to mention all the knockoffs others would make, to even have a slight bite of the Wii's pie. Needless to say, Nintendo's big gamble would have ended up paid off and truly helped push the gaming into a casual sphere. Thank you so much for watching until the end. It genuinely means a lot to me. To address some things though, I'm not certified at any of this, and I do not claim to be. I'm simply someone interested, and I put a lot of effort into researching all this. If I got anything wrong, please let me know. Comment it. I am not going to stop you. Please, let me know. I want to know. I don't want to push incorrect facts. If you enjoyed the video though, it means a lot to me. You can check out my Twitch for more consistent uploads. Well, not uploads. I'm live there throughout the week, playing games, not talking about them. But if you want to catch me live, I'm there, and I'll be there a little more often than you may see these uploaded. But yeah, thank you again for watching. I really do hope that I get to make more of these, and that you guys really like these, so I can keep putting them out, and I want to see you again next time.